Welcome back to Nenya Folktales. Before we dive into today's story, let us know in the comments, if the person you loved most suddenly started acting differently, would you confront them immediately, or would you stay quiet until you knew the whole truth? We'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you enjoy powerful stories filled with betrayal, justice, redemption, and unforgettable twists, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Now, let's begin today's story. My name is Marcus Johnson, and I was 41 years old when one phone call shattered 12 years of marriage. People say lies eventually come to light. What they don't tell you is that the truth rarely arrives all at once. It comes in tiny pieces. A strange phone call. A story that doesn't quite make sense. A smile that suddenly feels rehearsed. By the time you finally see the whole picture, you're left wondering how you missed something that had been happening right in front of you. Until 6 months ago, I believed I had the kind of marriage people prayed for. My wife, Simone, and I lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Atlanta, Georgia. We weren't wealthy enough to own a mansion, but we had a beautiful 4-bedroom home, 2 reliable cars, and a life we had spent more than a decade building together. I owned a commercial landscaping company. Simone worked as a senior project coordinator for a healthcare company. She was smart, organized, and the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with everyone smiling. That was one of the reasons I fell in love with her. She made people feel comfortable, including me. Every Saturday morning, we had the same routine. I'd wake up before sunrise, brew a pot of coffee, and sit on our back patio while the neighborhood slowly came to life. 20 minutes later, Simone would join me wearing one of my oversized hoodies, carrying 2 mugs, and complaining that I never made the coffee strong enough. I'd laugh, she'd steal bacon from my plate. Then we'd spend an hour talking about everything and nothing before starting our weekend. Looking back, those mornings became less frequent. At first, I blamed work, then stress, then life. Eventually, I stopped asking why she seemed so distracted. Love has a strange way of explaining away things that common sense would question. About 5 months before everything fell apart, Simone started visiting her mother every weekend. At least, that's what she told me. Her mother lived almost 2 hours away in Macon. According to Simone, her mother's arthritis had gotten worse, and she wanted to help around the house. I admired her for it. Family had always mattered to Simone. Every Saturday morning, she'd pack a small overnight bag, kiss me goodbye, and promise to be home by Sunday afternoon. Sometimes she'd send me pictures of home-cooked meals. Sometimes she'd text me that her mom was feeling better. Never once did I question her. Why would I? She was my wife. Then one Wednesday afternoon, everything changed. I was reviewing invoices in my office when my cell phone rang. The screen displayed a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail. For some reason, I answered. Hello? A gentle older woman's voice came through the speaker. Marcus? Yes. This is Evelyn Thompson. I smiled. Mrs. Thompson, how are you? She laughed softly. I've been better. Evelyn Thompson was Simone's mother. We had always gotten along. What can I do for you? There was a brief pause. Then she asked a question that made my stomach tighten. Sweetheart, is Simone all right? I frowned. Of course. Why do you ask? Another pause. I haven't seen her in almost 3 months. For several seconds I couldn't speak. The room suddenly felt smaller. What do you mean, you haven't seen her? I thought she was coming to visit every weekend. Mrs. Thompson sounded genuinely confused. No, baby. She's been so busy lately. I figured that's why she stopped coming. I stared through my office window at the parking lot below. Cars moved normally. People walked by carrying coffee. The world kept turning. Mine didn't. I forced myself to ask one more question. So, she hasn't been staying with you? No. And I was actually calling because I wanted to make sure everything was okay between you two. My heartbeat echoed inside my ears. I thanked her, promised we'd visit soon, and ended the call. Then I sat there, completely still. For 5 months, every Saturday, my wife had packed a bag, walked out of our front door, kissed me goodbye, and disappeared somewhere she had never intended to tell me about. I wanted to believe there was an explanation, a reasonable one. Maybe she'd been helping someone else. Maybe she was planning a surprise. Maybe, no. For the first time in our marriage, I stopped making excuses for someone who hadn't even asked for one. Instead, I opened our shared bank account, and what I found there would make that phone call seem like the smallest lie she'd ever told. Marcus's words stayed with me, long after I closed the banking app. People can lie. Memories can be manipulated. Conversations can be denied. But money almost always tells the truth. I logged into our joint account, expecting to find nothing more than grocery purchases, gas stations, and the usual household expenses. For the first several weeks, everything looked normal. Mortgage payment, electric bill, internet, car insurance, nothing unusual. Then I narrowed my search to Saturdays. The same Saturdays Simone claimed she was spending with her mother. That's when I noticed a pattern. Every weekend, there were charges that had nothing to do with the route to Macon. Coffee shops in Buckhead, upscale restaurants in downtown Atlanta, valet parking, boutique hotels. At first, I tried to convince myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she met friends after visiting her mother. Maybe she attended networking events. Maybe, I stopped myself. I was doing it again, making excuses before asking questions. I clicked on one hotel charge. It wasn't enormous, just enough to make it seem ordinary, if nobody looked closely. Then I checked another Saturday. Same hotel, different amount. The weekend after that, another hotel. My palms became damp. I pulled out my notebook and started writing dates. Every charge, every location, every amount. After nearly an hour, one thing became painfully clear. Whatever Simone had been doing, it wasn't random. It was planned, very carefully planned. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my forehead. No, I wasn't going to accuse her based on bank statements. Not yet. I needed facts. That evening, Simone came home, just after 6, carrying takeout from my favorite barbecue restaurant. She smiled the moment she saw me. I figured neither of us would feel like cooking. Normally that would have made my day. Instead, I found myself studying her. The way she smiled. The way she avoided eye contact for just a second, before kissing my cheek. The way she set her phone face down on the kitchen counter. Had she always done that? Or was I only noticing now? Dinner felt strangely normal. She talked about work, complained about deadlines, laughed about something one of her coworkers had said. I laughed too, or at least I pretended to. Halfway through dinner, I decided to ask a simple question. So, you heading to your mom's this weekend? She nodded without hesitation. Yeah, I already told her I'd be there Saturday morning. Not even a pause, not even the slightest sign of uncertainty. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I know it's been a lot lately, but she really needs me. I smiled. I understand. Inside, something broke. Because I had spoken to her mother less than 6 hours earlier. When we finished eating, Simone carried the dishes into the kitchen. A few minutes later, her phone vibrated. Just once. She glanced toward the living room. She thought I wasn't looking. Then she picked up the phone. Read the message. Smiled, and slipped it into her pocket. The smile wasn't meant for me. I knew that much. Later that night, after she had fallen asleep, I quietly climbed out of bed. Her phone rested on the nightstand beside her. For years, we had known each other's passcodes. We never had secrets. At least, I thought we didn't. I picked up the phone. The screen lit up. I entered the 6-digit code I'd used hundreds of times before. Incorrect passcode. I stared at the screen. Maybe I'd pressed the wrong number. I tried again. Incorrect passcode. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. She had changed it, and she hadn't told me. I gently placed the phone back where I found it. Then I lay awake until sunrise. Saturday morning arrived. Simone packed a small overnight bag just like she always did. She hugged me tightly before leaving. I shouldn't be too late tomorrow. Tell your mom I said hello, I replied. I will, she smiled. Then she climbed into her SUV and drove away. I waited exactly 15 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys. For the first time in 12 years, I followed my wife. Keeping several cars between us, I stayed far enough back that she never noticed. At first, everything looked normal. She drove toward the interstate, but instead of taking the exit that led toward Macon, she stayed on the highway. 5 minutes later, she took a completely different exit, one that led straight into downtown Atlanta. My grip tightened around the steering wheel. She wasn't going to her mother's house. Not even close. I kept following. She drove into the parking garage of an upscale apartment building overlooking the city skyline. I parked across the street where she couldn't see me. From my car, I watched her step out, carrying the same overnight bag she supposedly packed for her mother. She looked around once, then smiled. Not at her phone, not at the building. At someone walking toward her. A tall man, well-dressed, confident. He reached her first. Without hesitation, he wrapped both arms around my wife, and she hugged him back, like she'd been waiting all week for that moment. Marcus. That was the moment my marriage stopped being a suspicion and became a secret life I had never known existed. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't yell. I didn't call her name. I simply watched as the man took her overnight bag from her hand. Then, side by side, the two of them disappeared into the apartment building together. I had no idea who he was, but one thing was certain. He wasn't her mother. I don't remember how long I sat in that parking lot. 5 minutes, maybe 30. Time has a strange way of disappearing when your heart is trying to catch up with your eyes. Across the street stood a 20-story luxury apartment building with floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the Atlanta skyline. Somewhere inside, my wife was with another man. Not her mother, not a client, not a coworker. A man. My first instinct was to storm into the building, to demand answers, to make them look me in the eye. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My father used to tell me something when I was growing up. Son, anger makes you react. Wisdom makes you prepare. For the first time in my life, I understood exactly what he meant. I started the engine and drove away. Not because I was weak, because I needed the truth more than I needed a scene. The entire drive home felt unreal. Every traffic light seemed longer than usual. Every song on the radio sounded like noise. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat in the truck for nearly 20 minutes before going inside. The house was exactly as we'd left it that morning. Her coffee mug was still in the sink. Her favorite blanket was folded over the couch. A framed picture of us from our 10th wedding anniversary smiled back at me from the fireplace. I picked it up. We looked genuinely happy. Or maybe only I was. I gently placed the frame face down. I wasn't ready to look at that version of us anymore. That afternoon, I called the one person I trusted more than anyone else. My older brother, Derek. He answered on the second ring. "What's up, little brother?" His cheerful voice almost broke me. "You busy?" I asked quietly. There was a pause. "No. What's wrong?" "I need to see you. Now." 45 minutes later, Derek pulled into my driveway. The moment he stepped inside, he looked at my face and stopped smiling. "What happened?" I told him everything. The phone call from Simone's mother, the hotel charges, following Simone, the apartment building, the man. I expected him to interrupt. He didn't. He simply listened. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. "You sure it was her?" I nodded. "I wish it wasn't." Derek rubbed his chin for several seconds. Finally, he said something I hadn't expected. "Don't confront her." I looked at him. "You too?" He nodded. "If she's been lying this long, she's already got explanations prepared. You need proof. Real proof. Not assumptions. Not emotions. Facts." I hated that he was right. That evening, while Simone was still downtown with the mystery man, Derek helped me make a list. Everything we knew. Everything we didn't. What we needed to find out. Who the man was. How long this had been going on. Whether she had access to our business accounts. Whether there were debts I didn't know about. By the time Derek left, my grief had turned into determination. The next morning, Sunday, Simone walked through the front door at exactly 3:17 p.m. Right on schedule. She looked tired. Or perhaps, she wanted to look tired. She smiled the moment she saw me. "Hey, babe. Mom says thank you for checking on her." The lie landed so smoothly that if I hadn't spoken to her mother myself, I might have believed it. Instead, I smiled. "I'm glad she's doing better." She nodded. "She's getting stronger every week." Another lie. Delivered without hesitation. I realized something in that moment. Simone wasn't just hiding the truth. She had become comfortable living inside her lies. That evening, she unpacked her overnight bag while humming softly to herself. The same tune she'd hummed for years. I watched from the bedroom doorway. There wasn't a trace of guilt on her face. No hesitation. No shame. Just peace. How does someone betray another person so completely and still sleep peacefully at night? Monday morning, after Simone left for work, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Raymond Ellis. He'd spent more than 20 years working homicide before becoming a licensed investigator. His office wasn't fancy, just a small brick building on the east side of Atlanta. But the moment I sat down across from him, I knew I was talking to someone who had seen every kind of deception imaginable. He listened without interrupting. When I finished telling him everything, he folded his hands on the desk. "Mr. Johnson," he said calmly, "are you looking for reassurance? Or evidence?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for several seconds. Finally, I answered, "Evidence." He nodded once. "Good. Because evidence doesn't care about feelings." He explained how discrete surveillance worked, how photographs, timelines, and documented movements could establish facts. Then he looked me straight in the eyes. "If there's nothing going on, you'll sleep better. But if there is, you'll know exactly what you're dealing with." I signed the agreement before I could change my mind. As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Simone. "Thinking about you. Love you so much." I stared at the message. 3 simple words. Words I'd waited years to hear when we first started dating. Now, they felt like they belonged to someone else's marriage. I typed back, "Love you too." Then I locked my phone. For the first time since we met, those words weren't true. Not because I wanted to stop loving her, but because trust had started dying. And once trust begins to die, love rarely survives for long. 3 days. That's all Raymond Ellis asked for. "Go to work," he told me. "Live your life like nothing has changed. If your wife believes she's safe, she'll make mistakes." Those 3 days felt longer than 3 years. Every morning, Simone kissed me goodbye before leaving for work. Every evening, she came home with another story. A difficult meeting, an annoying coworker, a delayed conference call. She laughed, she cooked, she asked about my day. Sometimes she'd curl up beside me on the couch and rest her head on my shoulder while we watched television. If I hadn't seen her with another man, I would have believed every word she said. Wednesday afternoon, while I was meeting with a client about a commercial landscaping project, my phone vibrated. It was Raymond. Just 3 words, "Check your email." My heart began pounding. I excused myself from the meeting, walked to my truck, and opened my laptop. There was one new email. The subject line read, Day 1 surveillance report. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. The first page contained nothing but dates, times, and locations. At 8:12 a.m., Simone arrived at work. At 4:57 p.m., she left the office. At 5:26 p.m., she entered a grocery store. Everything looked perfectly normal. Then I reached the second page. There was a photograph. Simone, standing outside the same luxury apartment building I'd followed her to. Only this time, she wasn't alone. The same man stood beside her. He wasn't hugging her. He wasn't kissing her. He was holding her hand. Not casually. Not like friends. The way married couples hold hands without thinking. My chest tightened. I kept scrolling. Another photograph. The two of them walking into a high-end steakhouse. Another. They were laughing. Another. He reached across the table and brushed something from her cheek. Then came the picture that stole the air from my lungs. They were leaving the restaurant. She looked up at him the exact same way she used to look at me. Like he was the safest place in the world. I closed the laptop. Not because I had seen enough. Because I couldn't breathe. For nearly 5 minutes, I sat inside my truck, staring through the windshield. People walked past without noticing me. Some were laughing. Others were talking on their phones. The world carried on as though nothing had happened. But mine had just collapsed. After gathering myself, I reopened the report. Raymond had included detailed notes. The man had arrived in a black luxury SUV, registered to a company in Atlanta. He appeared to know the apartment concierge personally. The concierge greeted both of them by name. By name. That meant this wasn't a secret relationship that had just begun. They had been coming there long enough for the building staff to recognize them. I reached the last page. Raymond had written a short note. Based on observed behavior, this appears to be an established romantic relationship rather than a casual acquaintance. Surveillance will continue unless instructed otherwise. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Established relationship. Those two words echoed inside my head. How long? 6 months? A year? Longer? That evening, Simone came home, carrying my favorite peach cobbler from a bakery she'd introduced me to years earlier. "I know you've had a stressful week," she said with a warm smile. "So, I picked up your favorite dessert." I thanked her. We ate together. She laughed at one of my jokes. She reached across the table and held my hand. The entire time, all I could see was the photograph of her holding another man's hand. I suddenly realized something. The affair wasn't the only betrayal. She was giving him the same version of herself she'd once given me. The same smile. The same gentle touch. The same words. I wasn't losing my wife. I had already lost her. I just hadn't known it yet. Later that night, after Simone fell asleep, my phone buzzed again. Another message from Raymond. This one was much shorter. "Need to meet tomorrow morning. I found out who he is." I stared at the message. Who he is. Until that moment, he'd just been a stranger. A face. A shadow. Now, he had a name. And names have histories. The next morning, I arrived at Raymond's office before he did. He walked in, carrying a thick brown envelope. Without saying a word, he placed it on the desk between us. "I know who your wife's boyfriend is," he said quietly. I swallowed hard. "Who?" Raymond slid a photograph across the desk. The moment I saw the man's face printed on glossy paper, I felt the blood drain from my face. Because I knew him. Not well, but well enough. His name was Brandon Mitchell, a successful real estate developer. I'd shaken his hand twice at charity fundraising events. We'd even sat at the same table during a business banquet the previous year. But that wasn't the worst part. Raymond looked at me carefully before speaking again. "Marcus, there's something else." I looked up. "He isn't single." The room suddenly became very quiet. "He has a wife," Raymond nodded, "and 2 young daughters." I felt sick. Not only had my marriage been built on lies, another family was living inside the same deception. I had come looking for answers. Instead, I'd uncovered 2 broken homes that just didn't know they were broken yet. I couldn't stop staring at the photograph. Brandon Mitchell. The name sounded familiar because it belonged to someone I'd met before, but now another memory surfaced. About a year earlier, Simone had insisted we attend a charity gala for children's education in downtown Atlanta. I hadn't wanted to go. I'd spent the entire week visiting construction sites, and all I wanted was a quiet Friday night at home. She convinced me anyway. "You need to network," she'd said. "It'll be good for your business." At the gala, she'd introduced me to several people. Architects, developers, investors, and one of them had been Brandon Mitchell. Back then, I thought nothing of it. He'd been polite, well-dressed, confident without being arrogant. We shook hands, exchanged a few words about real estate, and that was it. Or so I believed. Now I wondered something that made my stomach turn. Was that really the first time they had met? Or was I simply the last person in the room to realize they already knew each other? Raymond interrupted my thoughts. I kept digging after identifying him. He opened the brown envelope. Inside were copies of public records, photographs, and business profiles. Brandon is 44 years old. He's been married for 16 years. He and his wife, Danielle, Have 2 daughters, ages 12 and 9. I closed my eyes. 2 little girls. They had no idea their father was spending weekends pretending to be someone else's husband. Raymond slid another photograph toward me. This one wasn't taken at a restaurant. It showed Brandon and Simone entering the luxury apartment building on 3 different Saturdays over the past month. Different clothes, different weekends, same smiles, same apartment, same lies. This wasn't just a weekend affair, Raymond said quietly. This has been part of their routine for a long time. I nodded slowly. I need to know everything. I figured you'd say that. He handed me another folder. There are financial records tied to the apartment. It's leased under a limited liability company connected to Brandon's development business. So nobody would immediately recognize his name. I looked up. They rented an apartment just for the affair? Raymond nodded. It appears so. The words landed like a punch to the chest. This wasn't reckless. It wasn't impulsive. It was organized, planned, maintained. Every lie Simone had told me had required preparation. Every weekend away had required intention. Every kiss goodbye had been rehearsed. As I left Raymond's office, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed my best friend, Kevin Brooks. Kevin and I had been friends since college. If there was one person besides my brother I trusted completely, it was him. You got a minute? He asked. Yeah. You sound tired. I've had a rough week. You want to grab dinner? I almost said no. Then I realized I didn't want to be alone. An hour later, we sat in a quiet barbecue restaurant on the outskirts of the city. Kevin studied me for several minutes before speaking. You've been somewhere else all evening. I sighed. There are some things I can't tell you yet. He nodded. I figured. Then he smiled. But whatever it is, you don't have to carry it by yourself. Sometimes, the simplest words hit the hardest. For a moment, I considered telling him everything. Instead, I simply thanked him. Because until I knew exactly how deep this went, I needed to keep the circle small. That night, Simone came home cheerful. She was humming while putting groceries away. At one point, she walked over, kissed my cheek, and smiled. I was thinking, we should take a vacation. I looked at her. A vacation? Yeah. It's been forever since we got away together. The irony nearly made me laugh. She wanted to plan a vacation, while secretly spending weekends in another man's apartment. I forced a smile. That sounds nice. She grinned. I'll start looking tomorrow. Later, after she'd gone upstairs, I sat alone in the living room thinking about everything Raymond had uncovered. One question kept bothering me. How had this started? Affairs don't usually begin overnight. There had to be a first meeting, a first conversation, a first lie. Somewhere, there was a beginning. The next morning, Raymond called again. I found something interesting. What is it? I pulled records from that charity gala you attended last year. My heart skipped. What about it? Brandon wasn't invited by the organization. I frowned. What do you mean? He was listed as the guest of... Raymond paused. Your wife. I froze. My wife. Yes. She personally added his name to the guest list. The room seemed to tilt. That meant the story I'd believed for an entire year was false. Brandon hadn't been someone we happened to meet. Simone already knew him. She had arranged for us to meet. While pretending they were strangers, she had stood there smiling as we shook hands. She had watched me thank the very man she was secretly building another life with. I slowly lowered the phone. Every memory from that night came rushing back. The way Simone seemed unusually excited to attend. The way Brandon greeted her with a smile that had seemed perfectly normal at the time. The way they effortlessly carried on conversations across the room. I had mistaken familiarity for friendliness. Now, I understood exactly what I had witnessed. It wasn't the beginning of their relationship. It was a performance. And I had unknowingly played my part. I thought discovering the affair would be the hardest thing I'd ever experience. I was wrong. Because Raymond had one final sentence before ending the call. Marcus, I don't think you're the only person they're lying to. What do you mean? I have reason to believe someone inside your own company has been helping them keep this secret. The line went silent. A stranger stealing my wife was one thing, but someone close to me helping them do it. That kind of betrayal cuts even deeper. I didn't sleep that night. Raymond's final words kept replaying in my head. I have reason to believe someone inside your own company has been helping them keep this secret. I went through every employee in my mind. My office manager, Lisa. My operations supervisor, Calvin. My estimator, Jerome. My executive assistant, Renee. I'd worked with some of these people for more than a decade. We celebrated birthdays together. We attended each other's weddings. Some of them had watched my business grow from one pickup truck into a company with more than 60 employees. Who would betray me? And why? The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. For the first time, I wasn't there to review contracts or meet clients. I was there to observe. People reveal a lot when they think no one is paying attention. Around 9 o'clock, Renee knocked on my office door. "Morning, Marcus." She placed a folder on my desk. "These are the contracts you asked for." "Thanks." She smiled politely and walked away. Nothing unusual. An hour later, Calvin stopped by to discuss a project delay. Again, nothing unusual. By lunchtime, I began wondering if Raymond had made a mistake. Then my phone vibrated. It was him. "Can you step outside?" I walked into the parking lot. Raymond was sitting inside an unmarked gray SUV. The passenger window rolled down. "I need you to see something." He handed me a tablet. On the screen was surveillance footage from the previous afternoon. The video showed Simone leaving her office building. A few minutes later, another woman walked out behind her. I recognized her immediately. Renee, my executive assistant. I frowned. "What am I looking at?" "Keep watching." The two women hugged. Not the quick, polite hug coworkers share. The kind of hug close friends exchange. Then Renee reached into her purse and handed Simone a thick envelope. Simone smiled, placed it inside her handbag. The video ended. I looked up. What was in the envelope? "We don't know, but we know they've been meeting regularly." "How regularly?" Raymond handed me another report. Over the past 4 months, Renee and Simone had met outside of work at least 11 times. Coffee shops, restaurants, shopping centers, places where no one from my office would expect to see them together. I felt sick. Renee had worked beside me for 7 years. She knew my schedule. She knew when I'd be out of town. She knew which weekends I had client meetings. She even reminded me of my anniversary every year. How long had she been helping Simone, and what exactly had she been helping with? That afternoon, I acted as though nothing had happened. When Renee brought in my afternoon mail, I thanked her just as I always did. She smiled. "So, big weekend plans?" I looked her directly in the eyes. "Not yet." She nodded. "I'm sure something will come up." If only she knew how true that was. Late that evening, Raymond called again. His voice sounded different, more serious. I identified the envelope. What was inside? It wasn't money. What then? He paused. "Copies of your business travel schedule." I nearly dropped the phone. "My, what?" "Someone printed your upcoming travel calendar. The same calendar only a handful of people inside your company can access." I leaned against the kitchen counter. Suddenly everything made sense. Every time I traveled for work, Simone somehow knew exactly when I would be gone. Every overnight business trip, every conference, every out-of-town meeting. She hadn't been guessing. Someone had been telling her. Someone inside my own office had been helping her plan the affair around my schedule. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was coordination. I thanked Raymond and ended the call. A few minutes later, Simone walked into the kitchen wearing pajamas. She wrapped her arms around me from behind. "You okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." She rested her head against my back. "I miss us." Those 3 words echoed through me. I miss us. How could she miss something she had been destroying piece by piece? Before going upstairs, she turned and smiled. "Oh, I almost forgot. My company is sending me to a leadership conference next weekend." "A leadership conference?" She nodded. "Just one night. Nothing exciting." I smiled. "Sounds good." She kissed me. "Love you." Then she disappeared upstairs. The moment I heard the bedroom door close, my phone buzzed. Another message from Raymond. Just one sentence. "There is no leadership conference." I stared at the screen. Another lie. Another fake trip. Another carefully planned weekend. Except this time, she had no idea I already knew. Raymond called less than a minute later. "I've confirmed Brandon has also cleared his calendar for the same weekend. So they're meeting again." "Yes. Different location this time." "Where?" "A private lake house about 90 minutes outside Atlanta." I looked out the kitchen window into the darkness. For weeks, I'd been reacting to their lies. Watching. Waiting. Gathering evidence. But something changed in me that night. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. Because if Simone believed next weekend would be another secret escape, she was about to discover that some lies don't end in hotel rooms. They end in courtrooms. And I had just decided exactly how I wanted this story to end. The next morning, I called Raymond before I even left for work. "I don't want to confront her. Not yet. I want to make sure this ends the right way." There was a brief silence before he answered. "That's the smartest thing you've said since we met." By now, I had enough evidence to know my marriage was over. What I needed now was evidence that would survive every excuse, every denial, and every lawyer. An hour later, I was sitting in the office of my attorney, Angela Brooks. She had represented business owners and high-net-worth clients in family law for more than 20 years. After reading Raymond's reports and reviewing the photographs, she closed the folder and looked directly at me. Marcus, emotionally, I know you want answers. But legally, you already have something more valuable. I frowned. What's that? A pattern. She tapped the stack of documents. The fake visits to her mother. The apartment. The hotel receipts. The surveillance. The business calendar. This isn't one mistake. It's sustained deception. She explained my legal options one by one. How to protect my business. How to secure financial records. How to prevent assets from quietly disappearing before the divorce process even began. Then she leaned forward. I need you to do one more thing. What's that? Change every password connected to your business. I hadn't even considered that. By lunchtime, my accountant and IT manager had quietly updated every company login, banking credential, payroll authorization, and cloud storage password. No announcement, no confrontation, just protection. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally one step ahead. That evening, Simone came home unusually excited. You won't believe what happened today. I looked up from the couch. What? My boss said if this leadership conference goes well, I could be promoted. She smiled as if she couldn't wait to tell me. You deserve it, I replied. The words tasted bitter. She walked over and kissed my forehead. Thank you for always believing in me. If she only knew. I believed in evidence now, not promises. Thursday afternoon, Raymond sent another update. Brandon had reserved a private lake house under the name of one of his business partners. Check-in was Friday evening, check-out Sunday morning. Exactly the same weekend, Simone claimed she would be attending her fake leadership conference. Everything was falling into place. Friday morning finally arrived. Simone packed a small suitcase. She stood in front of the bedroom mirror, adjusting her earrings. You sure you'll be okay without me? She teased. I smiled. I'll survive. She laughed. I'll call you tonight. I'll be waiting. She picked up her suitcase, kissed me goodbye, and walked out the front door. I watched from the window until her SUV disappeared around the corner. 5 minutes later, Raymond called. She's on the move. Heading toward the lake. Not yet. She's meeting someone first. My pulse quickened. Who? I'll call you back. For the next 40 minutes, I couldn't focus on anything. Then my phone rang again. Marcus. It's Brandon. They just met in a shopping center parking lot. What are they doing? He left his SUV. They're driving to the lake house together in her vehicle. I closed my eyes. Even after everything I'd already learned, somehow it still hurt. Saturday morning, Angela called with good news. The financial protection orders we'd prepared were ready to file the moment I gave the word. She also had another surprise. Our investigator found something else. What? Brandon has been using company funds for some of these trips. I sat upright. You're sure? Very. He disguised several expenses as business development meetings. I couldn't believe it. The lies weren't just destroying marriages anymore. They were beginning to threaten careers. Angela's voice remained calm. Marcus, I think this is about to become much bigger than either of them expected. Late Saturday evening, Raymond sent the most detailed report yet. Time-stamped photographs, video clips, vehicle records, entry logs. The evidence was overwhelming. There was no innocent explanation left. No misunderstanding. No room for creative storytelling. The affair wasn't an accusation anymore. It was a documented fact. I spent most of Saturday night sitting alone on my back patio. The same patio where Simone and I used to drink coffee every weekend. The same place where we dreamed about growing old together. Now, I was planning how to end our marriage with dignity. Not revenge, not anger. Dignity. Around midnight, my brother Derek came over, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He sat beside me without saying a word. After several minutes, he finally asked, You ready? I nodded slowly. I think so. He looked toward the quiet neighborhood. You know, the hardest part isn't catching someone. It's accepting that the person you loved stopped existing long before you found out. I looked down at my coffee. Maybe he was right. Or maybe the woman I loved had never truly existed. Maybe I'd simply fallen in love with the version of herself she wanted me to see. Sunday afternoon, Raymond sent one final message. They're heading home. I thanked him for everything he'd done. Then I stood up, walked into my house, and looked around. The family photographs were still hanging on the walls. Her favorite flowers were still sitting on the kitchen counter. Her jacket still hung by the front door. For the last 12 years, this house had been our home. In less than an hour, everything would change. Because Simone was driving back expecting another ordinary Sunday. She believed she'd walk through the front door, tell another carefully crafted story, and continue living 2 separate lives. She had no idea that while she'd been building a fantasy with Brandon, I'd been quietly preparing the end of ours, and this time, I wasn't the one walking into a trap. She was. Sunday evening arrived just before sunset. I stood in the living room, looking out the front window. Everything was quiet. The television was off. The music was off. Even my phone sat face down on the coffee table. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't nervous. I was calm. Not because the pain had disappeared, because I had accepted that the marriage was already over. At exactly 6:42 p.m., headlights swept across the front yard. Simone's SUV rolled into the driveway. I watched her climb out with the same small suitcase she'd taken 2 days earlier. She looked refreshed, rested. She even smiled to herself before opening the front door. "Babe," she called. "I'm home." I didn't answer. She stepped into the living room and stopped when she saw me sitting quietly in the chair. "There you are," she said with a laugh. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" I picked up the remote and turned on the lamp beside me. The room filled with a warm yellow light. "How was the conference?" I asked. Her smile didn't change. It was exhausting. So many presentations. So many meetings. She kicked off her shoes and set her suitcase near the stairs. "But I learned a lot." I nodded slowly. "What was your favorite session?" For the first time, she hesitated. "It was, the leadership workshop." I folded my hands. "The one that never happened." The smile disappeared from her face. "What do you mean?" I stood up. "There wasn't a leadership conference this weekend, Simone." She laughed nervously. "Marcus, what are you talking about?" Instead of answering, I walked to the coffee table and picked up a thick brown envelope. I placed it in front of her. "Open it." She looked from me to the envelope, then back to me. "What's this?" "Open it." Her hands trembled as she pulled out the first photograph. It showed her and Brandon getting into her SUV Friday afternoon. She stared at it without speaking. Then she flipped to the next one. The lake house. Another. The two of them walking hand in hand by the water. Another. Dinner on the back deck. Another. Brandon kissing her forehead. By the fifth photograph, tears had begun filling her eyes. "This isn't." I raised my hand. "Please, don't insult me." The room fell silent. She slowly sat down on the couch, photographs scattered across the cushion beside her. "How long?" I asked. She didn't answer. "How long has this been going on?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Almost a year. Almost a year. 11 months of lies. 11 months of fake business trips. Fake family visits. Fake late meetings. 11 months of kissing me goodbye before driving to another man." I closed my eyes for a moment. Not because I was angry, because hearing the number somehow hurt more than seeing the pictures. When I opened my eyes again, she was crying. "I'm sorry. It got out of control." I shook my head. "No, it didn't get out of control. You controlled it. Every lie, every trip, every excuse." She buried her face in her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you." I looked at her quietly. "Then why didn't you stop?" She couldn't answer. Instead, she whispered, "I don't know." For several moments, neither of us spoke. Finally, I slid another folder across the table. She looked at it. "What's this?" "Divorce papers." Her head snapped up. "You've already filed?" "I've already started." She stared at me as though she didn't recognize the man standing in front of her. "I thought..." "You thought what?" "That we'd talk." I nodded. "We are talking. The difference is, I already know the truth." She began crying harder. "I love you, Marcus." The words echoed through the room. Months earlier, they would have meant everything. Now, they sounded like they belonged to someone else. I looked at her gently. "Love doesn't need this many lies to survive." She lowered her head. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." I believed she meant it. But regret and trust are not the same thing. One can arrive after the other is gone forever. Just then, there was a knock at the front door. She looked up, confused. I walked over and opened it. Standing on the porch were my brother Derek, my attorney, Angela Brooks, and a uniformed process server. Simone's eyes widened. Angela stepped inside calmly. "Mrs. Johnson, you've been officially served." The process server handed Simone the documents. She looked from the papers to me. "You planned all of this?" I answered honestly. "No, you planned this. I just prepared for it." She broke down completely. For several minutes, all that could be heard was her crying. Eventually, she stood, picked up her suitcase, and walked toward the door. Halfway there, she stopped. Without turning around, she asked one final question. "Did you ever hate me?" I thought about it carefully. Then I answered, "No. I hated what your choices turned us into." She nodded slowly. Then she walked out of the house. I watched from the doorway as she drove away. There was no shouting, no insults, no dramatic chase. Just silence. Sometimes silence is the loudest ending of all. 3 months later, the divorce process was moving forward. Brandon's wife had learned the truth. His company had opened an internal investigation after questions arose about business funds used during his secret trips. As for me, I sold nothing. I lost nothing, except a marriage that had already ended long before I knew it. One Saturday morning, I sat alone on my back patio with a cup of coffee. The chair across from me was empty. For the first time, that emptiness didn't feel lonely. It felt honest. I finally understood something I'd spent months searching for. Healing doesn't begin the day someone apologizes. It begins the day you stop waiting for them to become the person they chose not to be. And that day was the day I took my life back. Peace is worth fighting for. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and always choose the truth, even when it's difficult.